Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Draft Digest. The sickest NFL draft and scouting podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome into another episode of the Sick Podcast, Draft Digest. John Vogel with you again. So riding solo tonight. Excuse me. Woo. Riding solo tonight. Emily was delayed at an airport today and was unable to make it back in time. So we're going to go roll through a couple things here without her solo. God help me. We're going to get through this tonight. No, I got some interesting stuff to get into it with you. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about the running backs and the linebackers and kind of how they've adjusted. And I kind of want to touch on the receiver position without getting into a lot of different stuff. There's a couple people I want to bring on to talk wide receivers later on this summer. But I want to kind of target a specific role that sort of exploded into an NFL offense really within the last 15 years. Everybody had them, and now, with the evolution of the game, we don't know if they're kind of staying in place. So we're going to take a look at the slot receiver, the small slot receiver, and see if that's really something that people are still using in the modern NFL. So just a little bit of backstory on the small slot receiver. If you go back 30 years into the NFL, 94, 95, 96, the early 2000s, there weren't a lot of teams that were out here running what we call 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end on the field. There was a lot of two running backs, a fullback, a running back. That was your base offense. And what sort of happened was the evolution of the passing game, came to the frontier of the NFL. It moved up from college. There's a trickle up effect that comes from high school that works through college into the NFL, as well as the trickle down effect that it works back down through. The small slot receiver was sort of one of these roles that not a lot of people were able to figure out in the NFL. And it was just because it was at that point in time, it was hard to justify taking your fullback or your tight end off the field and putting another wide receiver out there, let alone a very small guy. So fast forward here to about 2006. The New England Patriots get their hands on Wes Welker on the waiver wire. He was released from the Miami Dolphins. He had kind of done some special team stuff there. He was a very small receiver, 5'6", 175. And Bill Belichick had this idea as soon as he hit the waiver wire, what he wanted to do with him. And what they ended up kind of doing is essentially putting him in the slot. Back then, that was revolutionary in the NFL. There weren't a lot of teams doing that kind of stuff. So he ended up getting matched up against linebackers, or maybe even a safety would come down and it would play in the box against him. And this, he absolutely thrived. They couldn't cover him because Wes didn't have a lot of long speed. He wasn't an absolute burner athlete. He was more of a guy that was great through his cuts, his breaks, and essentially he turned it into several consecutive 100-plus catch seasons, was very productive, and really helped open up opportunities for Brady to hit his receivers on the out boundary down the field. So Welker sort of became the prototype for the slot receiver in the NFL. So everybody started going out and they're like, hey, we need to find a small slot receiver guy that we can match up against linebackers. We can get down on the safeties and absolutely take advantage of this by taking our fullback off the field, taking the tight end off the field, however we want to do it, and creating this mismatch. And so, that worked out for a couple of years. As several other players of the like started working up. Julian Edelman ended up ultimately replacing Wes Welker with the Patriots, and this has continued, since 2007, so the last 14, 15 years. So now we've kind of gotten to a point where everybody plays 11 personnel. So the defense has fully adjusted as we kind of talked about last week, to taking a linebacker off the field and playing in a base nickel package. So now that we're at that point, we've seen the rise of the big slot receiver, right? The guy that he's really just more another wide receiver, or he might be a undersized tight end, a guy that's not maybe the best athlete, but he's got size going into that slot. This really kind of exploded in the NFL. It hit its pinnacle, or at least the launch point for the pinnacle, with Chase Claypool and the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2020. When he was drafted in the second round, they put him in the slot. He caught 10 touchdowns that year. So Dalton Kincaid kind of fits this role with the Buffalo Bills. He's a tight end, but he plays a lot out of the slot. Kelsey with the Chiefs has made an absolute living out of doing this out of the slot. So the big slot is here to stay. So that begs the question, what is the state of the small slot? Is that a role that teams are even going to be using anymore? So what I've kind of found going through, 32 NFL teams and specifically diving into this position is that there are a lot of guys that fit this role that are currently on NFL rosters. In fact, 31 of 32 NFL rosters still have a guy that you could classify as a slot receiver. And not to get too nerdy and into too many specifics, I didn't include guys that mostly play on the boundary, so like Zay Flowers with the Baltimore Ravens. He's typically that small slot receiver, but he plays enough on the boundary. He's good enough on the boundary. He doesn't have to be classified in that group. So this is going to include guys, Andy Isabella might be a name a lot of draft nicks remember. Calvin Austin with the Steelers, Demario Douglas with the Patriots, Elijah Moore, so on and so forth. So it's these types of players. But going back to the point, 31 out of 32 teams currently use a small slot receiver. Now, how often do they play and are they productive? So the first counter that NFL defenses had in the evolution of this game was they introduced the small slot cornerback. And the slot cornerback was maybe a guy that was too small to hold up on the boundary, but he could maybe stick with this guy underneath, the small guy that's winning against the linebackers and stuff. And every team started filling up with those. So now that they're getting bigger again, a lot of teams for their base package have put together almost like a third safety, essentially, like a rover. If you look at the draft guide and everything that I put out, every document I put out, I always include rovers. That's kind of the star additional, slot corner safety combo that has been developed to essentially take away these big slots, or at least present a better matchup. The slot corner, the small guy, that I'm kind of describing, still exists, but it is not nearly as prominent as it once was. So it's really just more of a chess game and from the sideline, essentially, with the coaches, because everything, especially on the boundary, especially, wide receivers, corners, running backs, linebackers, this is a matchup dependent league that the NFL operates on right now. And it's sort of a chess match because you're taking guys off the field, you're putting them on the field, and you're trying to take advantage of the mismatches offensively that the defense presents you. The defense is trying to watch and monitor these guys coming on and off the field to see how they want to respond. So the opportunity still exists, for these smaller guys, because some of them are still going to match up well against even like a rover safety. But the opportunities like that Wes Welker had, and some of the guys that came shortly thereafter him in this sort of packaged role, they don't necessarily exist anymore. So ultimately, the small slot receiver has got to be an elite, quick burner. If you want to think about some of the guys that are at the top at this point, Elijah Moore is one of them. He had a good productive year last year with the Browns. He ran a 4.35 40 when he came out. So he's an absolute blazer, and he's very quick as well. Um, Hollywood Brown has stuck around for a long time. He used to play on the boundary. Now he's come into the slot. That's a guy that's an absolute burner as well. Now he didn't test when he came out of college just because he was recovering from an injury, if I remember correctly, and so he didn't get that opportunity. But he's a guy that's still doing it out of the slot. I think that one of the guys that's going to be big this year is going to be Jalen Noel, the rookie, with the Texans, because again, he is a burner. 4.3, 440. He had a 40-inch vertical, an 11-foot broad jump. I mean, ridiculously explosive numbers, or 11.2 broad jump. Excuse me, my bad. And he's going to be one of these guys that handles that well. Tank Dell, when he eventually comes back from an injury, he's another one of these guys that's been very productive in this role. So it's to be a difference maker, you have to be a burner. The only other way that you can do it, if you're not necessarily a burner, maybe you're closer to average 4 or 5, 40, is you essentially have to be a running receiver. Olamide, I'm slaughtering his name. Olazakias, who was with the Commanders last year. He also fits this role. He had a very good year, very productive year last year, and he's kind of in that group. So there's not a lot of guys in the top in that tier that you would say, yeah, I want this guy on my team. I wouldn't say the position is necessarily dying at this point, but I do think that their opportunities to get the matchups that they're looking for are dwindling. Defenses now could fully adjust and prepare to take on, regular or big slots, essentially. That still could come down the line. But for now, these opportunities, unless you are just a top-tier athlete or you're very good or, you've got some sort of calling card, you're not getting that type of production. You're going to be limited in the opportunities that you have to get that production or to be productive at all. And it's going to be a rough go, I think, if you're a smaller guy trying to get in the NFL. Now, to kind of put this into a little bit of a perspective as I wrap it up, or this point, think of the NBA, right? The NBA years ago, 6'3", 6'4" was tall enough a lot of the time to play maybe a small forward. It's not like that anymore in the NBA. Now you're going to have to play guard. And if you're not quick enough to be a guard, you might as well forget about it. That's essentially what's happening across the league right now is the talent that is being developed and nurtured to play in the league. The talent pool, at least, is much stronger than it ever has been. Football has become such a huge sport, not just here in America. It's really starting to grow internationally. So you're starting to get these international prospects in the mix. People are coming from other countries to America to play high school football. It's a massive thing that's undergoing, essentially, to where we're filtering out a lot of these body types that have worked in the past, and eventually, you're going to have to be 6 foot and 220 to play running back, or vice versa, right? You're going to have to be bigger. The talent pool is bigger than it ever has been. The commitment that a lot of these young athletes put into this, and the resources that are available for them, it's unlike anything that we've ever had in the sport. So I think we're going to continue to see that rise. On the NBA, it was the same thing that happened, right? More people got into basketball, became an international sport. A lot of these guys that are coming into the NBA now are even, they're tall. They're from France. They're from China. They're from different countries. And that's sort of weeded out some of those guys that used to be able to make it. Essentially, it's the same thing that's going to happen in the NFL. But that's the slot receiver. I don't think it's necessarily dead. I think that it is. I wouldn't say it's dying yet. I mean, because of the way the game evolves, it's like a roller coaster, right? You go extreme one way, extreme another. Last week we talked about the running backs. Running backs dying. Do you really need a running back? And then this year we have all these running backs explode, for career high rushing totals. And it's because the box, isn't loaded anymore. It's easier to run against it. So we go forward, we go backwards. It's just how the league operates, and it's going to continue to be like that. So it is the small slot receiver is probably going into a dip, and we'll see if it makes a comeback. The other thing I wanted to spend this episode on, because that's about halfway through now, is I wanted to get into an early look at some of these really good guys coming up in this class. Summer scouting is already well underway, and a lot of us draftniks, a lot of people we're getting into the details of some of the guys that we need to be watching on Saturdays and trying to get some of that work done. Figure out what those questions are that you want to have answered during the season. I think that's the most important thing, of the summer scouting. A lot of guys, I see a lot of, draft people, especially in the media, they grade their guys now, and they put out these grades. And when the actual draft season rolls around next winter, they're the exact same grade. And it's like, did you even watch the guy this year? This is not the time of the year to be grading guys. This is the time of the year to be figuring out what this guy needs to get better at and put an expectation there. Expectations are a good thing. We talk about the Arch Manning expectations. Maybe that's an example of a bad expectation, because it's the media putting a lot of pressure on a young guy who has played some, not necessarily a lot, but he's played some. And there's still questions to, first off, the competition that he played against. Obviously, they were going to play well with that team. What's he going to do when he has to face a big team? Texas has got Ohio State early this year. How are they going to handle that? How is Arch going to handle that? So expectations, you want to set them reasonably. So the question, like I think I just got asked on a radio show the other day, what the expectation, what I want to see from Arch Manning this year is, I just want to see how well he processes against better defenses, right? We know that he's a pretty good athlete. We know he's got it's an okay arm. It's not great. And we know that when Quinn Ewers was healthy this year for the Longhorns, they used Arch primarily as a running quarterback. So why was that? That's a question, especially considering the reputation his head coach has, Steve Sarkisian, as an offensive innovator. So why was he being used exclusively as a running quarterback at that point? So that's a question. So that's where the expectation is reasonable. I'm not saying that, hey, I'm expecting him to be a top 5 quarterback in the nation and top 5 prospect next year. Just saying, this is what I need to have answered, and then I'll have a better idea of how he's going to do at the next level. So that's the way that I think that you want to approach the summer evaluation process, is not necessarily putting the grade on the guy saying, oh, he's going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick. I could see it already. It's pointing the evaluation on, okay, these questions have been answered. We know he can do this. These are the questions that I still have. Because you don't come out of college, right? You don't look at a guy coming out of college and go, I've got the perfect picture for him. I know exactly what he can do. I know everything about him. The questions are all answered. You still have questions about guys when they come out that they may not have answered. Heck, Josh Allen several years ago, right? The question was the competition the entire time. His completion percentage wasn't great, and he's got a great arm. He's got great tools, but can he throw the ball accurately, consistently? And he's answered that. Every single one of these top guys that you can think of from the past, they weren't the surefire quarterback. I mean, the media may have portrayed them as, but everybody's got questions. Everybody has an expectation that's set for them when they're going through this cycle as well. So that's what I want to. That's what I think we need to kind of focus as a draft organization, as a draft collective of evaluating players. This is not the time to be grading. However, that being said, some of the top guys I've touched on already this summer a little bit. I think we got into it with Luke McCown a little bit when we had him on. Is the LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, one of my favorites in the class. Sort of comparing him to Baker Mayfield. I've seen a lot of that. I think that's pretty accurate. Just a gritty guy, loves football, comes from a coach's family. He's got a good arm. And then the other guy I think that a lot of people are pushing up toward the top in terms of quarterbacks is Drew Aller. Big guy, physical, good arm, capable athlete. His question really remains to be answered on the same one that Allen had, honestly, is can he be consistently accurate? Can he consistently process? He's got 29 starts in his career already. That's a good number. Even if they don't make the playoff, they just play a bowl game this year. Penn State's expected to be competing for a national championship this year. They have an absolutely loaded team. But even if they don't make it, they have a couple games where they go bad. He's going to have 13 starts if he stays healthy, plays them all. He'll be coming out of college with 42 career starts. And one of the things I think that I keep bringing up on this show for good reason is quarterback starts matter. And we've seen that the last few years of evaluating quarterbacks. The top two rookie quarterbacks that came out this year that were most prepared to play in the NFL were the two guys that had the most college starts, Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. Why is that? Well, because they've seen a lot of football. These guys came in, they started playing from the moment they got on campus. They were the starters. Jaden Daniels at Arizona State, his first 3 years, and then does his last two. He got the special COVID year, does his last two at LSU. Bo Nix in the same boat, 3 years at Auburn, last two at Oregon. So they've been exposed to a lot of football, a lot of different schemes, a lot of different environments, and they've developed through those repetitions. And we can get in, there's a whole, Jaden Daniels uses the VR technology. Cool. Awesome. But he's played a lot of football. Bo Nix has played a lot of football, So though that start number really does matter. And I think Drew Aller, assuming he stays healthy, fingers crossed, knock on wood, he's going to do that. They come out with 42 starts to be one of the most experienced quarterbacks in this class. Garrett Nussmeier is not going to be on that tier. He's going to be I don't know if LSU competes for a title this year. I don't know if they make the playoff. It's tough in the SEC. You have to have a near perfect season to do it. He could. I certainly wouldn't put it past him. I think it's just I don't like this LSU team compared to the last couple that they've had. So if he elevates this team, that answers a question right there for you. Okay, he can overcome his size and really bring the playmakers out around him. But I think he'll be coming out with 27 career starts if he starts 13 this year and stays healthy. So it again is a good number, but it's not the same type of experience that Aller had, that Nix had coming out, that Daniels had coming out. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as we go through this process. I think that starts really do matter. Some of the other guys, one of the guys that I keep ranting and raving about every time I talk about running backs is Nick Singleton at Penn State. I'm telling you, Penn State's loaded this year. They have so many guys that potentially are going to be very high draft picks. Danny Dennis Sutton, the edge rusher, prototype size, 6'5", 265. Very good athlete. Nick Singleton is that big running back at 6 foot, almost 220 pounds that I just described earlier. Penn State is really, they're the favorites for a reason to win the title this year. And there's a lot of talent that we're going to have to keep an eye on while they continue to play over there. A name that I thought is kind of gone under the radar most of the year at least so far from what I've seen from everybody on the draft side, is Jam Miller, the running back at Alabama. And I bring him up because I really liked what I saw from him last year. Reminded me really very strongly of a Devin Singletary type, who played well for the Texans before having a decent year last year with the Giants with all their struggles and everything else. Just a gritty downhill, smaller, compact runner. Jam kind of fits that really well, even wears the same number that he does. So Jam is a guy that I keep an eye on this year. I like him a lot. And one of the names that I've kept bringing up throughout the process, just, on Twitter, anytime anybody asks me about edge rushers, is Derek Moore at Michigan. It's really hard not to bet on traits. And he's got that average size, 6'3", 265. But he absolutely flashes. And the edge position, we'll get into this in another episode really in deep. The edge position is not a bad one to have, maybe be a little bit shorter in. You don't want to be too short, obviously, but being a little bit shorter means that when you go into your dip, when you're trying to dip under a block, you got a little bit of natural leverage there. That you don't have to, that maybe a 6'5" or 6'6" guy can't naturally replicate. He has to build that and put and develop that into his game. So that's not a bad thing necessarily. It'll knock you sometimes in the draft process, especially if there's other guys that are up toward the top, like Dennis Sutton that we just mentioned, Kevin Falk at Auburn. Even I guess you could bring up Zion Young at Missouri. But these guys, the 6'3", 265 defensive end, they're still a good role. You could still be very productive and outplay your draft position. He looks kind of like one of those guys to me that might be able to do that. And I guess the last guy I'll bring up, this is kind of one of my personal favorites, and I think he's playing at the wrong school. Dominic Orange, the nose tackle from Iowa State. And with that kind of name, he should be playing in Tennessee, but that's okay. He's a great freaking player. 6'1", 330, very, very athletic for his size. In fact, I think I saw some projections that he could run under a 5'2", 40 at 330 pounds, which would be magnificent. But he's in that nose tackle, that sort of run stuffer type spot where if you can bring an element to the pass rushing game, you automatically elevate yourself over everybody in your position group. And he looks like one of those guys that can do that. He can two gap. He's also a gap shooter. He can get up in there. Got a wicked first step. He's a guy that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Iowa State might be a sleeping giant, honestly, in the Big 12 this year with everything that they've got, the weapons they've got. Their quarterback as well is a guy I would keep an eye on this year. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about him, but Rocco Becht is a guy to keep an eye on as well. But Dom Orange is going to be an absolute joy to watch, and I can't wait for Saturdays to start rolling around with college football on. And I don't think Shane can either back there. So we're right about 30-minute mark here. Next week, Emily should be back. We should have some guests lined up to come in and bring their expertise and get through the rest of the summer, breaking down some of these position groups, naming some of the guys that you want to keep an eye on this year because they could be really good. And we will be back at it next week with the full gang. But for everybody over here at the Sick Podcast, I'm John Vogel. This has been the Sick Podcast Draft Digest. Shane, let's go ahead and wrap her up.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Draft Digest on YouTube. X, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.